some Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Solomon, although sometimes I think Song of Solomon isn't included. Grouped together because of their poetry, these books emphasise the understanding and tone of wisdom for all areas of life. Proverbs are mostly written and compiled by King Solomon and later additions by King Hezekiah's scribes. I have to pronounce the names, but I think it's Olga, who wrote Proverbs 30, Lemuel, Proverbs 31, between the 7th and 10th century. And the theme is sort of righteousness leads to prospering and wickedness leads to suffering. That tends to be the theme of Proverbs. Then you've got Ecclesiastes, traditionally written by King Solomon. It says in Ecclesiastes that it's written by Koheleth, who's the teacher and preacher, and also the son of King David. The theme tends to be life is meaningless, and the word that's used quite often is hevel, which means vapour, breath and smoke. So sort of like life is like smoke. Remember God, fear God and keep his commandments, because sort of everything else is hevel. And yeah, it's quite a meaningless read, just what it's like. Everything is meaningless, it's quite depressing, isn't it, when you read that? Song of Solomon, traditionally King Solomon wrote that. It's a love song between two lovers, Bible project, summed it up quite well. Song of Songs is celebrating humans' desire for intimacy and pointing to humanity's ultimate purpose, to be united with God and his wisdom. And then we have Job, so we'll go to Job. Why is Job a Hebrew book when the main character is not a Jew and it is not based in Israel? So I think one of the things that came up when I was researching was it shows us that topics addressed within Job are not just an Israelite issue, but a universal issue, regardless of where you're from. So authorship. The book of Job is anonymous. Some books, like I went through some commentaries, and some commentaries just refused to answer it and said it's anonymous, that's it. Other people had a go at finding an author. So some attribute it to Moses, some believe it was written by Job himself, others believe it was written by Elihu because they think the bit where Elihu speaks is added after, and that he wrote the book, but there's no evidence for any of that. It is not documented anywhere in Scripture, therefore it can only be speculated about until further historical evidence comes to light. So we don't know who the author is. When was Job written? Isn't it the oldest book in the Bible? So there's a wide range of opinion about this. Ideas on dating have ranged from many centuries before Moses to the period between the Old and New Testament. So the language is written in Hebrew, though some words appear to be influenced by Aramaic. Aramaic became more widely used toward the end of the Old Testament. It is reasonable then to believe it was written later. However, Aramaic inscriptions from the 2nd millennium BC point towards an earlier date. Ugaritic text, these were clay tablets discovered in 1928. They showed an extinct northwest language used in the ancient coastal city of Ugarit. It was a city destroyed around 1200 BC, which is northern Syria. It is translated very closely to Biblical Hebrew, many letter for letter. Job contains many rare Hebrew words that also appear in Ugaritic. This similarity has helped scholars interpret difficult passages, and this argues for its connections between the suffering of Job and the suffering of Israel during exile have been made by some scholars, suggesting it was written during this period. And interaction with other books in the Bible, the argument is that the author must have had some knowledge of biblical books written later. So Isaiah 40:55, the creation hymns resemble God's speeches in chapter 38:41 in Job, emphasising God's wisdom and sovereignty in creation. So Job being written as a response to the wisdom of Proverbs. So sometimes the righteous suffer, so the wisdom of Proverbs doesn't always hold. Righteous people suffer during the exile of Israel and Judah. So there's an argument that Job was written as a response to Proverbs to give another answer to suffering, which argues for a later date. So. But nobody knows when it was written, so it's just speculation. And these are two, so this isn't Job, but they're quite similar, this is Proverbs, so which one was written first? But this is an argument as well that some scholars have sort of said that one has influenced the other. But how do you know which one was influenced first? Okay, so style of writing. So Job is a book of Hebrew poetry. Hapax legomena is a word or expression that appears only once in a specific context. For example, it only appears once in the New Testament, once in the Old Testament, once in a sort of a Bible or language, and there is more hapax legomena in Job than anywhere else in the Bible. So it has a prose, introduction and epilogue. Prose is narrative and descriptive. It tells you what happens and is used in most places in the Bible. Poetry in Job tells you how something feels, using metaphors and parallelism. Job is considered lofty prose compared to somewhere like Genesis, so it's still quite poetic even though it's classed as prose. So parallelism is common in Hebrew poetry and is used to emphasise a point by saying the same thing in a different way. So for example, this is in Job. After this, Job opened his mouth and cursed the day of his birth. So that's prose, and then this is how it's got a bit more poetic. May the day of my birth perish, and the night that said what is conceived. So it's said in two different ways. Chiasmus is a literary technique where an idea is presented and then repeated in reverse order. Usually each verse represented by a letter. So I've chosen quite simple. So A-B-B-A. There's two ideas repeated in reverse order. So this is an idea that people have. This could be in Job. So we've got A is the prologue, A is the epilogue, B the dialogue, B the final speeches, and in the middle is the wisdom poem. So it's kind of like the C in the middle, the wisdom poem is meant to be the emphasis, so that's where the focus is, and that's where we should pay attention. So that's the idea. And Leviticus had that, so I think it's, is it 26, the centre of Leviticus? But it's the Day of Atonement is the centre of Leviticus, and that's the idea that, you pay attention to what's in the middle. The writers are pointing you to something. So it makes it quite like breaking code, doesn't it? I find it quite fascinating. And then here's another simple one. So many who are first will be last, and the last will be first. And you've got A is first, first, last. It's just the way style of writing. Okay, now we get into Job. So chapter 1. There was a man in the land of Uz, whose name was Job, and that man was blameless and upright, one who feared God and turned away from evil. So who was Job? So he was blameless, he stayed away from evil. He was greater than anybody in the East. So some say that he was more wise, some say he was just richer than everybody else, and the idea that he was more righteous than anybody in the East. He lived in the land of Uz, and he had 7 sons and 2 daughters. I read a couple of commentaries and they sort of pointed to the idea that because 7 is the perfect number, it means completion. Number 3 means completion, and then 7 and 3 together adds to completion, so it's like that perfect number. So that's been done on purpose as well, according to some commentaries. And also the 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, apparently that's quite to do with the perfect number as well. He had many servants. He wasn't sinless, but he knew how to deal with his sin, and he even offered sacrifices for his children, so he offered burnt offerings. God himself says that he is blameless, a man of complete integrity, God-fearing, and he stays away from evil. Was Job a real person? There is no evidence he was a real person, or no evidence he was not. There is nothing in the text that suggests that he is a mythical, imaginary, or fictitious character. He is mentioned in other Bible passages. In Ezekiel, Job is mentioned alongside Noah and Daniel as examples of righteous men. James mentions Job's perseverance and suffering. Job is written as a poem, not as a historical account. Some believe it is a folk tale or a courtroom drama passed down from generation to generation, first orally and then written down at a later date. Based in some truth but developed over many years to what is now. We don't know. The heavenly court scene used as a literary device to give the reader's understanding, characters do not. So these are the ideas that are all out there. But it just seems that nobody really knows. So he's blameless and he's upright. So the word blameless in Hebrew is tam, and it means blameless, complete, morally pious. It's related to the absence of observable sinful acts, so marital infidelity, just treatment of servants, generosity to poor, and the avoidance of idolatry. And Job denies all these areas in chapter 31. It does not mean he's perfect, as in sinless. And this word tam is apparently never used to describe God, but it is used to describe God's works, so his creation. straight, right, upright, and pleasing is your star. This is in Proverbs, in all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your path your star. When was Job set? So it's set in the time of the patriarchs, so Abraham, Isaac and Jacob. Job was a priest to his own family, like the patriarchs, prior to the priestly system and giving of the Mosaic law. So he was a priest to his own family. Measurement of wealth based on how much livestock he owned. His length of life, he lived for 140 years. Unit of currency, kesita. It's also known in Genesis and Joshua. So that kind of points to the time of the patriarchs. So it's written, I don't know when it's written, but it's definitely set in the time of the patriarchs. The land of Uz. So the location of Uz is uncertain, but scholars believe it's in northern Saudi Arabia or southern Jordan. Since the time of the patriarchs, called Edom. Edomites descended from Esau. There's occasional references to farming, rivers and hills throughout the book of Job. The Edomite plateau would not prevent this. The thunder and lightning storms, as well as the unwelcome east wind, are characteristic of the area. There are three characters with the name of Uz in the Old Testament: the son of Aaron, who is the grandson of Shem, Abraham's nephew, son of brother Nahor, and there's a descendant of Esau who lived in Seir. So those are the names of Uz. Were Job and his family nomadic? So the word Ohel, tent, appears 14 times. The word bet, house, appears 25 times, but this can also be used generally for home. The bet, the house, claps on Job's children, so it's more likely to be a building. And in Job it talks about him living around a city, so even though he could have been a little bit nomadic, but he was at some point based at the city as well. Jeremiah, oh yes.
I just want to say, in favour of the authenticity of him being a real person, that there is actually a tomb in Oman that they have there in dedication to Prophet Job.
Right. Oh, that was interesting.
So you can look it up on Google. Tomb of Job.
Jeremiah 25 verse 20 refers to the king who was drinking the cup of the Lord's wrath, but Edom is also mentioned separately to us in this bit. And Lamentations 4:21, rejoice and be glad, daughter Edom, you who live in the land of Uz, but to you also the cup will be passed and you will be drunk and strip naked. So Edom is going to see the wrath of God. And the map, so Edom is around this area here. The names of God that are used in Job. So the word used for God predominantly in the poetic parts of Job is El and Eloah, which means mighty. And then Elohim, plural for Eloah, used mostly in the prologue and only a few times in the rest of the book. El Shaddai, God Almighty, used in Job 31 out of 48 times in the whole Bible. And then Yahweh, the name of God of Israel, is used during the beginning and closing chapters of Job. It is only used once in the dialogue. Why do you think that might be?
He's not necessarily an Israelite and not aware of, even though he lived in the time of Moses, wasn't actually aware of that name being given.
So yeah, I think one of the commentaries I read was about the fact that they weren't Israelites, so Yahweh was like the covenantal name was given to for Israel, the personal name of God. So the name El Eloah is more generic, but Job does use it in chapter 12. And it's used by the narrator. So it points maybe to a Hebrew writer, maybe. Heavenly Council. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. The Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, does Job fear God for no reason? Have you not put a hedge around him and his house and all he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands and his possessions and increased the land. But stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will curse you to your face. And the Lord said to Satan, behold, all that he has is in your hand. Only against him will you stretch out your hand. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. Job never knew what happened in the heavenly court, and neither did his friends. Only the reader knows more than Job did. A hedge, so it was a thorny hedge used in the ancient Near East to keep out predators. And yeah, it's interesting that it's talking about God putting a hedge around Job to protect him. I think later on, Job uses the same word to sort of say that you've hedged me in with suffering. So that's quite interesting.
Can I just say one thing before we go on about the idea of this being written at a later date when the events occur?
Yeah.
One of the reasons why we would say that too is because most of it's written in poetry. And either his three friends were absolutely brilliant poets, and Job was a wonderful poet too. I've never had a discussion in poetry, ever. So very evidently this is not a verbatim account of everything that these people said, or that this is a poetic account of what they said. And I think for many of us that's quite a hard point to grasp. I thought this was God's inspired word.
Yes.
Yeah, well it is, and every word of it is inspired. But God chose, for whatever reason, for his glory, deliberately to use poetry in order to bring this out. And one of the reasons I think we struggle with Job is because it's poetry, and it's Hebrew poetry. And I wouldn't ask for a show of hands, but probably a good number in this room are not that keen on poetry. And Hebrew poetry never rhymes. It scans, but it doesn't rhyme.
Yeah.
So that makes it more difficult for us to sort of get behind what's going on in this particular place. That's not to say it isn't true. I would certainly believe that everything that happened to Job actually happened to him. This was not embellished. This is not that little, you get a disclaimer at the beginning of the film that says this is mostly true, but for dramatic purposes. It's not that kind of thing. Because if it is, they made a huge mistake, because my section, which is quite a lot of chapters, is very repetitive and quite boring in places, if I'm honest. Sorry.
No, it's good. So, the Sons of God, I don't really know how to pronounce this. I've not heard anybody say it, but I think it's Elohim. So, in 1 Kings 22, Jeremiah 23, and Psalm 9, points to God having a covenant. And I know there's plenty of other places in the Bible that talks about God being on the throne. Daniel prophesies in Daniel. 7 of the ancient ones sat down to judge in the heavenly court with millions of angels ministering to him. These holy ones serve as messengers to do God's bidding. The sons of God are both plural and inferior to God. In 1 Kings 22, the prophet Micaiah shares this vision of God sitting on his throne with all the armies of heaven around him, and the Lord says, "Who can entice Ahab to go into battle against Ramoth Gilead so he can be killed?" The chapter speaks of the Spirit willing to inspire all of Ahab's prophets to speak lies. Does this suggest that not all of the sons of God are good? And then obviously we've got Genesis 6. So in Genesis 6, the sons of God appear again. It speaks of the sons of God having children with human women. And we know at some point after this, God flooded the earth and started again with Noah. And then we've got Satan, which is Hasatan, which the direct translation is the accuser, or the adversary. Job 1, verse 6, one day the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. So, was he actually among them, or did he just come with them? It's translated literally, the accuser. Satan is a common Hebrew word for an accuser and can refer to either an earthly or a heavenly accuser. The definite article the before Satan refers to a role, not a person's name. So it's more like a job description. Was this another heavenly being given the role of an accuser, or is this Satan who prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour, the one who accuses us day and night? In 1 Chronicles 21, Satan incites David to take a census of Israel. Here the proper noun is used. It's the first time the name Satan is used, not as a job, it's Satan. Yes, the first time it's used as proper noun in the Old Testament.
So isn't this more like everyone, not necessarily distinguishing, Satan from the rest? come from must show themselves present to God and account for what they're doing.
Yeah, I imagine so. I don't actually know. Peter, that might be a good one for you.
Certainly they all are, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he is sovereign in every way.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who you are, whether you're on earth or up in heaven, you're responsible to him, you're subject to him. Most definitely, yeah.
Yeah. But you brought out, it's not clear, because it says the council was before God and Satan being with them.
Exactly.
So did he come in to the council,
Yeah.
or was he part of it?
Yeah.
That's where the ambiguity.
I found the sons of God really tricky. I found it really. I feel like you could do a whole session just on that. I found it quite.
But that's true of most of Job.
Yeah.
Yeah. Come earlier to bring your campaign.
Yeah.
31 chapters.
Absolutely. Yeah.
36.
Yeah. Hasatan is used in Zechariah 3, where he's accusing Joshua the high priest. The same word is used. What do everyone think? Do you think it is Satan, or do you think it is just another angel being used as an adversary?
I think it's Satan, the Satan.
Yeah.
How? I don't understand, but it's definitely the devil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does seem like what we know that comes later on and what is said about him accusing Job.
Yeah.
You know, so the insight in what comes later gives you an insight into who actually is talking
Yeah.
in that part.
Yeah.
Probably another point in the favour of it being quite an early written text, and perhaps the understanding of who and God's revelation to the writer was still forming, I guess, in the writer's mind of what is God talking about here.
Yeah.
Just like in our lives, God will reveal in part, and it's the truth.
Yeah.
But it's I find that quite a helpful point in the camp of it being written very early, perhaps.
And I think there's a parallel between this and the garden, which is obviously the serpent there, and we say that's Satan.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, okay, Adam and Eve have just about everything, but there's one thing they're not allowed. But Satan's goal is to destroy their relationship. They're trusting God, which he succeeds.
Yeah.
But with Job, well, he's got everything, basically. But Satan says, if you take it away, then he won't trust you.
Yeah.
So you see that this is the enemy. This is the one that's against man and against.
Will Job still follow you if you take
Yeah,
it away?
exactly.
I mean, for me, the harder point is how can Satan's found in the presence of God?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you do that any time?
What's he doing there?
Absolutely.
Where is the council being held? No. In the Bible, there are 3 heavens. There's heaven, which is the sky. Genesis 1 tells you about that we can see the atmosphere. There's also heaven where the stars are, which is different from the sky, very obviously. And it seems to me that that's the area where perhaps this took place. In that sort of area where he's called in Ephesians the prince of the power of the air. The spirit that now works in the children of disobedience. But then there's heaven itself, which is called the third heaven, or heaven of heavens, where God dwells. It would be an awful thing, wouldn't it, to suddenly arrive at the pearly gates, or however else we get there, and find Satan's on the other side. Wouldn't that be awful? There's a place where God is, where nothing that defiles can ever possibly come in.
Yeah.
And that's not just future. Of course it is future, but it's characteristic of who he is.
Absolutely.
I found that kind of helpful to think about. That. Number one, there are loads and loads and loads of spirit. Loads. As you mentioned, millions of spirit. We forget that. I've got a question. What do you think about Satan? Is Satan limited to be in one place at one time?
It appears so. It appears at work, he doesn't see that omnipresence as an attribute.
I always think it's incredible that God has a relationship with Satan. We think, how many of us would have a lifelong relationship with our worst enemy? Conversations and,
God doesn't have any enemies, because to have an enemy, you need to have someone of equivalent power. He's not an enemy to God, he's someone who's
enemy to us.
objective.
He's an enemy to us.
He's an enemy to us, sure, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, he's definitely better.
I think we're sort of in the same situation as Joe, because, as you say, we're given a little picture of it, and of course we're trying to figure out more, and God's saying, actually, I'm not telling you anymore. Joe,
it's all
in this situation, you knew a lot less, and we can see the answer, but he's trying to figure it out. We'll always want to know a little bit more, won't we?
So he tells us to pour through the rest of the Bible to find it, and guess what we find? There's not much more to know, wherever you go.
So I'm having a problem with understanding the timing of the book, because I googled if the friends of Job had any connection with Abraham, and it seems they do. Bildad, he's linked to one of the sons of Abraham through his second wife. It also says that, I don't know how you say his name, Eliphaz, he comes, he's associated with Esau, and it just goes on down. Buzz is also related through one of the sons of Abraham's brother Nahor. So it seems like they're descendants, you can follow this genealogical line, and if they lived at that particular time, then it does sort of give you an indication that these people were real. There's something tangible that you can put your fingers in that Job must have been a real person because of these connections through people of the Bible. And so, it kind of frames it that it's around that time period or a little bit subsequently after that.
I think I read a little bit, sorry. I think I read a little bit about that, and I couldn't find sort of, because there's no evidence of it in the text, about them being related to Abraham. But I think in the genealogy, I think those names are there, but I think because it can't be proven, I think it's sort of the idea that those names are there and could be related, but at the same time. I think the reason why I didn't include it was because I wasn't sure whether or not it was good evidence for that to say. It's a good point. I feel like I'm on the side of an older book.
Yeah, I think we had a little chat earlier last week and this week, and I think we've all come to that conclusion. It has an Abrahamic feel to it.
Yeah.
It has that sort of culture. The question is not when did the events happen, but when was it written about. The biggest problem is the further you go away from the events, if you're sort of saying, well, this might have happened 2000 BC, and you're writing this in 800 BC, that's an awful long time between the two events, even if you've got bits and pieces passed down from here to there. And it's going to be a debating point. The truth is these guys who know an awful lot more about the Hebrew and all of that than I have. I know nothing about Hebrew, apart from an odd word here and there. They are very, very divided upon whether it's a really late, what do you mean late or early? But was written nearer to creation, let's put it that way, nearer to Noah. And divided between, as you quite rightly said, those who come in about David's time, and then again David and Solomon, and then again those in the middle of the exile. But for me, it feels like that. Maybe the ambiguity is to say to us, whatever generation you're in, whatever time scale you're in, whatever the culture around you might be, you need to take notice of this book.
Yeah.
I'll show you the books that I've got so you can see.
See, I'm a bit of a romantic about it, so forgive me, but I love the fact, I actually love the ambiguity, because I'm just like, but isn't that true of like suffering? Isn't that true of God's sovereignty, that we understand in part, but there's mystery. There's as Paul says, the mystery of Christ, isn't it? The romantic in me is very happy. I'm loving this.
I think Ali is on the side of sort of the later. David on the side of the earlier.
Oh yeah, badly enough.
And that was one of the first things I found when I was trying to put it together. I was like, they think different things. So I had this guy who was quite conservative, and he was very much like, yes, it's obviously written, early. And then this guy was, no, absolutely not. It's written later. And I was like, all right, okay. They have different opinions completely. And then I listened to somebody recently. She was a student at Cambridge, and she memorised the Job in Hebrew. And she was very much at the side. Ali sent me that one. She was definitely on the side of it being written at a later date. So it seems that I think more conservative scholars are for an earlier date, and sort of newer scholars are for a later date.
It's interesting because I don't know much about Job, but I did read the ESV Study Bible introduction to Job, and that would be on the conservative side. But one thing that stood out is there's a phrase used in the Job, I think you might have referenced it quickly, that actually is word for word as a phrase in Isaiah. And but I suppose it goes back to the question, is Job quoting?
Exactly. Plagiarism at its best.
There's a few other cases where it could be quoted.
So if anyone's interested, there's a website called biblicaltraining.org that collates materials and resources from various theology institutions around the world, especially in the United States, because it was started by a charity there. And the idea is that they put together very good resources from Bible colleges, famous ones. And there is a course there about the book of Job. There are 40 lessons on the book of Job, 15 hours and 15 minutes, 40 lessons. So I did this, the whole thing, 3 or 4 years ago, something like that, whilst I was doing DIY work, putting together my office. I was listening to this on my headphones whilst I was sewing and doing that. It is an excellent resource by someone called Dwayne Garrett. He is Professor of Old Testament Interpretation and Professor of Biblical Theology since 2004 in the faculty at Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary, Baptist Seminary, Canadian Southern Baptist Seminary, Mid-American Baptist Seminary, and Korean Baptist Seminary. He's a big head. Anyway, he is an expert of ancient Hebrew. And I realized when I listened to this how much is lost in translation in the book of Job, especially in the book of Job. There's a lot lost in translation, and the way in which he presents it is amazing because he brings out all these linguistic nuances. There's a lot of information there that goes into a lot of depth. Like I said, 15 hours, 15 minutes. If anyone's curious, I can share the link. But it's an excellent resource in my opinion.
Yeah, I can verify that. I listen to one every breakfast time. I've got one Garrett, and I listen to about 30 of them.
Oh, good.
Yeah, it's amazing what you can do when you know, the dedicated times when you're busy doing something else, checking on your phone to make sure whatever, or sitting there because you told the kids they can't have their phones at the table. It is quite an easy thing to do, and it's very easy to listen to. And what's good is there is a transcript of everything he says produced after each one. There's a summary, but there's also a transcript, and he also has an analytical bit. This is how the chapter divides. It's very good. I mean, I've got a couple of books as well, but I won't put those away. The best one's the Bible. It's a really good one. I've really found that. It's an excellent resource.
Okay, sheep and servants burnt up and consumed. We had theft again, the Chaldeans, Mesopotamians, modern day Iraq, raided and stole all the camels and killed the servants. Abraham left of the Chaldeans to go to Canaan. And then you've got storm, which is the wind. The sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. And behold, a great wind came across the wilderness and struck the four corners of the house. And it fell upon the young people, and they are dead. And I alone have escaped to tell you, the servants, the one that told Job. So Job has passed the first test. And Job arose and tore his robe and shaved his head and fell on the ground and worshipped. And he said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. In all this, Job did not sin or charge God wrong. So yeah, he's passed the first test. And then
So I'm assuming, Becky, sorry to stop you. I'm assuming that word, the Lord, is Yahweh.
That's Yahweh. In the
So Job didn't actually use it.
the narrative uses Yahweh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When was Yahweh first used in the Bible?
Revealed to Moses and Deuteronomy.
So would that potentially have been after Job? So that's why Yahweh isn't very common in there? Because
I
Job
think it's
wouldn't have
I mean,
used Yahweh.
Yes,
as a
Yahweh is
name.
used. Abraham was the word Yahweh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Genesis 12, the Lord spoke to Abraham.
Okay.
That's Yahweh.
Right.
So we're quite a long way back. Before that, it was always either God or the Lord God.
Okay.
I'm not sure that is Yahweh there.
I don't know.
I've
I
got,
haven't got my Hebrew Bible with me, but I did, I wouldn't understand.
I've got,
Hallucinate.
I've got a resource I can
I can find
send it to, but it gives you all, in Job it gives you all the names for God and where it was used. That's quite interesting. I'm not sure it is Job that uses Yahweh. I could be wrong, but I think it is just the narrator that uses Yahweh. But it would be good to know.
No, it's Yahweh.
It is Yahweh.
It's Yahweh because you can tell in the text of most Bibles if it's capital L, capital R, capital D, that's Yahweh. If it's L-O-R-D, it's more likely to be a Dominic or sovereign Lord. We learn these things as time goes on. I know those.
Excellent.
Yeah.
But in Exodus, well, we won't talk about that, that's another problem.
Yeah.
Okay, so the second test. One day the members of heaven court came again to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came again to present himself before him. And the Lord said to Satan, where have you come from? Satan answered the Lord, from roaming throughout the earth, going to and fro. Then the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil. And he still maintains his integrity. Though you incited me against him to ruin him without any reason. Skin for skin, Satan replied. A man will give all he has for his own life. Then now stretch out your hand and strike his flesh and bones, and he will surely curse you to your face. The Lord said to Satan, very well then, he is in your hands, but you must spare his life. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and inflicted Job with painful sores from his soul to his feet to the crown of his head. And then we've got a picture there of Job. This is when his friends have come, and his wife sitting in the ash heap. An ash heap is like a communal rubbish dump outside the city gates, where outcasts, severely unwell and homeless, and the destitute gather, and probably a case of quarantine as well. And then Job's wife, Job scraped his skin with a piece of broken pottery as he sat among the ashes. His wife said to him, are you still trying to win your integrity? Curse God and die. Do you think if she was tested, did she pass the first test?
She wasn't the one on the test.
No, I'm saying that if she was, would she have passed the test by what you're reading?
Job's children would have been her children as well.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, was her response, did she pass the test? I don't know, but for me, there needs to be a level of compassion and empathy there that, you know, if God took away all three of my children, I don't know what state my heart would be in, you know, so...
I think most of them would probably react in that way.
She was part of Job's test.
Yeah.
Because if she had comforted Job, then he would have had someone to rely on, but
Yeah.
she wasn't helpful in that situation.
But he said to her, you speak as one foolish women speak. Shall we receive good from God, and shall we not receive evil? In all this, Job did not sin with his lips. And then this is where we come tore their robes and they sprinkled dust on their heads. And they sat with Job. And this is probably where they did the right thing. And they sat with him, and then that's when they become awful comforters for the rest.
Mm-hmm.